So we're going to look at the heart and the circulation of the blood through the body and through the heart. And this is just a typical diagram of the heart. It's got all the valves that are involved, or sorry, not the valves, but rather the arteries and the veins that are involved, and then the different sections, the atrium and the ventricles that are involved. So the circulatory system in our bodies, blood circulates through a closed system of blood vessels pumped by the heart. So the heart is that pump that's sending all the blood through your entire body. There's three separate little systems that are involved in this process. There's the pulmonary system, and that's when the blood moves through the lungs, and that's very important because the blood needs to pick up oxygen to send to your cells in your body, and it also needs to get rid of the carbon dioxide that is built up in your cells. So the blood must go through the lungs to pick up oxygen that it needs and to release the carbon dioxide. Then there's also the systemic system, and that's when the blood is flowing through the body. Anytime that it's left the heart and it's not going to the lungs and it's flowing through your legs and your arms, anywhere in your body, that's the systemic system. And then there's also the cardiac system, and that's when the blood is actually flowing through the chambers of your heart. And there's different blood vessels involved in this system as well. You've got arteries, and they carry blood away from the heart. Now, you might not know the name of every artery in the body, but anytime that you hear the word artery, you need to remember that it's moving away from the heart. So, the A in artery, for me to remember it, I just remember that the A stands for away. So the blood is moving away from the heart. It's already been to the heart, it's moving away from it. It might be moving away to the lungs, it might be moving away to the rest of the body, but if it's moving away, it's an artery. If it's coming back to the heart from anywhere in the body, then that vessel is called a vein. Okay, so those are the two easy ways to remember arteries and veins. If it's a vein, it might be coming back from the lungs to the heart, or it might be coming back from any other part of the body to the heart. But if it's returning blood to the heart, it's a vein. And then there's also capillaries, and this is where gas exchange takes place. And they can be carrying blood in either direction. They're very, very small blood vessels, and they're working on a cellular level, and it's the capillaries that blood is crossing to get into your cells. So they're very, very small blood vessels, and that's where the gas exchange is occurring between your blood and your cells. So the heart contains 4 chambers, and it contains 4 valves. So we'll go through this slowly, but on the right side of your heart, so you've got a right atrium. Blood is returning from the top of your body, from your head region. It's also returning from the bottom of your body, from your leg region. So it's returning from these 2 major veins here. And all of that blood enters the heart into this chamber right here called an atrium. And atriums, when you have an atrium on this side, the right atrium, or you've got an atrium on this side, the left, the function of the atrium is to hold blood. That's all it's doing. It's collecting the blood and it's holding it in an area. You've also got valves that stop the blood from moving in between different areas of the heart. You've got valves here. You've got an atrioventricular valve here, an AV valve, a semilunar valve. Okay, and you've got the same valves on this side of the heart as well. And those valves are making sure that the blood moves in the proper direction, so that when the heart contracts, it's like squeezing a balloon again. If you had water in a balloon and you squeezed it, it would shoot out one end. Well, if it had 2 ends to it, your body would need to make sure it didn't go in the wrong direction. So that's what those valves are there for. They're there to make sure that the blood continues to flow in the right direction. And then it's got ventricles as well. And here's a ventricle here, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle on this side. You've got 2 ventricles. 2 ventricles, 2 atrium. And the ventricles are the parts of your heart that are actually contracting and pumping the blood. And if you look at the walls of the ventricles, here's the 2 ventricles here. If you look at these walls here, you can see that they're a lot thicker than the walls in the atrium or anywhere else in the heart. These walls are thicker because that's where the blood is being pumped. They're contracting to pump the blood. So the 2 atria, they're very thin-walled and they receive the blood. Remember, your blood is returning from the body and it's coming into the right atrium. And when it returns from the heart, or sorry, the lungs rather, when it's returning from the lungs, from the right and left lungs, it's coming from these blood vessels as well, it returns into the left atrium. So they're receiving blood. And then you've got two ventricles, your right and left ventricle, and they're very thick-walled because they're contracting, and they're pumping the blood through the body. Okay, and now your valves, your atrioventricular valves, they allow blood to pass from the atrium to the ventricle. Okay, for interest's sake, you've got what's called a tricuspid, a bicuspid valve, and you've got chordae tendineae that are involved in it, the tendons that are shutting those valves closed. You don't need to know the name of the tricuspid or the bicuspid valve. You don't need to know the chordae tendineae. You don't need to know that those are the tendons that are shutting it. What you do need to know is that an atrioventricular valve allows the blood to pass from the atrium to the ventricle. Atrio, right, referring to the atrium, ventricular, referring to the ventricle. It makes sure that the blood moves. If we go back here, the blood moves from the atrium to the ventricle, and that's the only direction that it's going to move. So this is your AV valve, your atrioventricular valve. And when the ventricle contracts to pump blood, your body needs to make sure that that blood moves in this direction. And when it's down here and it contracts, your body needs to make sure that it moves in this direction. It cannot go backwards, and it does not want it to go backwards this way. So when this contracts, this valve shuts. So the only direction that the blood can flow is forward. And when this ventricle contracts, this valve shuts, so that the blood can't go backwards. It has to continue forwards. That's what the atrioventricular valves are doing, the AV valves. The semilunar valves, they prevent blood from flowing back into the heart after it's left the heart. So if we go back to here, here's an AV valve, here's a semilunar valve. So the blood has left the heart now. In this case here, it's going to the lungs. It's going to the right and the left lungs. Your body doesn't want it to go back. It needs it to go to the lungs and continue forward through the system. So when it goes through here, this valve shuts and the blood goes to your lungs. You've got another AV valve. You've got another semilunar valve. So your atrioventricular valve is here. Your other semilunar valve is here. So when the left ventricle contracts and it pumps the blood out to the aorta, which is going to send blood all the way through your body, this semilunar valve is going to shut, because your body doesn't want the blood to go back into your heart and back up through the system. It needs it to continue forward, it needs it to leave the heart, and it needs it to go to all the different parts of the body. So the semilunar valves are stopping blood from going back into the heart after it's left. The AV valves, the atrioventricular valves, they allow blood to pass from the atrium to the ventricle, and that's their job. There's 4 blood vessels of the heart. There's the vena cava, and if it's the anterior vena cava, it comes from the top. So if we look back here, here's your anterior vena cava. So the vena cava is a vein, and it's bringing all the blood from the top of your body into the heart again, into the right atrium. You've also got a posterior vena cava. Here's the posterior vena cava. It's coming from the bottom of the body back into the right ventricle. It's collecting all the blood from the bottom of the body. You've got pulmonary arteries that are involved as well, and they move blood away from the heart to the lungs. Remember, if it's an artery, it's moving blood away from the heart. Pulmonary refers to the lungs. So a pulmonary artery is moving blood from the heart to the lungs. If we go back to this diagram here, you've got your pulmonary arteries here. That's a pulmonary artery. That would be the right pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. As the blood comes through the heart, it's got no oxygen in it because your body's used it already. It's got to go to the right lung and to the left lung to pick up oxygen again. So the pulmonary arteries send the blood to the lungs, away from the heart. Okay, I'm going to stop it here and then I'll continue in the next video with pulmonary veins.